Breaking news this hour on the Big Money Show. Wall Street rattled by fears that China has caught up to America on artificial intelligence. NVIDIA leading the sell-off, down about 15%, tanking on the news that DeepSeek has an AI model similar to ChatGPT, but operating at a fraction of the cost. They say it was built in 2 months for less than $6 million. It's now the #1 app on the App Store. And some breaking news just in on this story. DeepSeek says it was hit with a large-scale cyber attack. Meanwhile, big U.S. firms have pledged hundreds of billions to power AI here. Wall Street fearing these big investments may be for nothing. Welcome to the show. I'm Brian Brenberg here with my co-host Taylor Riggs, Jackie DeAngelis, our new addition Dagan McDowell, as well as our guest for the hour, Charles Payne. Welcome, everybody, to the Big Money Show. Charles, I'm going to come to you first. And I'm going to give you a chance to brag for a second. And don't expect that always, okay?
Okay.
But when it comes to this AI story and DeepSeek, you've been on this for a while.
Yeah.
Why is the market so surprised today?
I think the last part, the App Store part, I think well, there were a few things, right? You had people like Mark Andreessen saying last week that this was revolutionary, which I thought was interesting that the market did not sell off when he said that. But remember Friday when Meta upped their budget? Right. So it felt like, okay, it's out there, and Meta's still saying they're going to buy all these chips from NVIDIA. But then as you start to get the data and we start to see people say, okay, this is why it's cheaper and perhaps why it's better. And these are some technical things, right? They have multi-token system as a reinforced learning. They've got this expert system, so you don't have a big giant brain trying to figure everything out. If you ask a question about the size of football fields, the football field expert would help, and it doesn't drain the whole system.
Right.
It's open source. They use less bits and they've broken it down in ways, and of course, the 96% cheaper price point.
And that's the piece that's been getting everybody, right?
Sure.
The fact that these guys are spending tens of billions on chips, and DeepSeek says we can do it for less than $6 million.
But there's a lot of questions, right, out there about this thing in terms of scalability, what it can really do, and ultimately what Meta is doing and all these other folks, these hyperscalers are doing, is beyond a consumer product that these folks are downloading on Apple. It's much bigger. It's much bigger than that. But there's a serious warning here about just the AI race in of itself.
Right.
And I think, listen, we can't just kind of assume that we're in a driver's seat here.
It very much looks the other way, actually, on this one. Taylor, Charles mentioned Mark Andreessen, the famous tech investor. So he tried this thing out, and he loved it. But there's a question about how applicable this can be to the corporate setting, to big businesses versus a ChatGPT type crowd. What do you make of that?
I'm going out on a limb here. I think I'm going to say something that every panelist disagrees with. I think that this is a big deal. I think the market is maybe overselling a little bit today, but I'm a little worried. I think this sort of solidifies that we aren't guaranteed to be #1 no matter what, that we have a competitor in this race. DeepSeek came out with V3 in December. We kind of ignored it. They came out with R1 a week ago, and we kind of ignored it. We were in the election, the inauguration, executive orders, Davos, and I think it kind of flew underneath the radar. There's this thing called Chatbot Arena out of UC Berkeley where they're measuring the ranking of this. DeepSeek fell second only to Gemini. They're beating Grok from AI, from Elon Musk. They're beating Anthropic. I mean, you had another Silicon Valley founder out there saying that he just moved from Anthropic to DeepSeek because it's a quarter of the cost. So these are people in Silicon Valley who are seeing this and starting to make moves on it. They're leaner, they're meaner because of our export restrictions. They've had to do more with less. I'm hearing data points that they're doing with 2,000 NVIDIA chips what we do with 16,000. They're doing with 5.6 billion what we are asking $1 trillion to do. That makes me nervous.
Okay, so the nervous race is what I'm hearing, the theme evolving. And Jackie, when Charles mentioned that, I saw you kind of perk up and you're like, yeah, this is a story. So let's talk about the race with respect to China, because it's not just an economic problem, it's also a foreign policy issue. What are you reading here?
Well, basically what it's telling us so far is that export curbs aren't keeping China back from working on its AI capacity. What I found striking about this is that they used NVIDIA chips to train their model, Brian.
Right.
And also, when I think about companies and I think about inauguration, Taylor, you brought it up, all the CEOs standing there, I'm like, who's running this company? So I dug a little into that. Liang Wenfeng. He was born in 1985. He's 39 years old. He started the first company that he started. He went to a prestigious university in China with some of his classmates. It was after they graduated, but it seemed a little Zuck-like to me as I was digging into his story.
Oh.
And they've got some really interesting things here. You mentioned the cheapness, but he's kind of going to emerge as China's Sam Altman. And I think this is a name we're going to hear more about. The service is free right now, but companies that are using it, they charge a fee to. That's probably going to change as we move forward. And I also thought, to your point, Charles, it was interesting about this, what they called supervised fine-tuning to make their version of ChatGPT work better. They basically have a human feeding some information to start off the bot to get it going, and then it takes it from there. I think it's really brilliant. You got to think about the Trump administration, how they're looking at this. They are worried about China from a foreign policy standpoint, from a national security standpoint. Trump has said, we need to be the leader in AI because they're trying to be, and we need to be number one. So the game's on.
And Dagan, you know, the Biden approach to this was, well, let's sanction competitors, let's put export controls on chips. Interestingly, if you can believe what DeepSeek has said, and I would take that with a grain of salt, that wasn't an issue for them, or they found a way around it, which tells me that's not the winning strategy on AI.
This is way overblown in the market in a sense that, listen, every major U.S. tech company is developing chips. Every single one of them. So NVIDIA should have sold off a long time ago, given the fact it's still a double just in the last year. Google, Meta, Amazon, Microsoft, AMD all have developed artificial intelligence chips or are developing, number one. The Biden model, if they'd gotten a second term, and this is according to Mark Andreessen, was to make sure that AI was a function of government control. Right. The Biden administration told Mark Andreessen and his partner, Ben Horowitz, there will only be 2 or 3 large AI companies. We are going to regulate and control those companies. There will be no startups, unquote. That is why we should all praise to the high heavens that President Trump is now running this nation, because it was going to be economic fascism out of the Biden administration. But here's what I'm hearing from the tech world. This, the issue of DeepSeek and training this model at a fraction of the cost, under $6 million versus $100 million to $1 billion for American models. Well, the talk is that's because DeepSeek piggybacked on OpenAI and the large language model GPT-4. So yeah, it should have been a fraction of the cost, because you're essentially leveraging something that a great America and Sam Altman and his team had already created. And then secondly, from commercial use, the big discussion in the Valley is, well, it's Chinese. And anything, if you use just the basic model that came out in December, you can't ask any questions or get any answers if it's about communism. So are you going to use this if it's sending, if DeepSeek or these models, any that might come out, is transmitting data back to China?
Let's show. We've got a full screen there of what happens if you ask DeepSeek about Tiananmen Square. You're not going to get a very satisfying answer if you're looking for the truth. Dagan, you brought up something that's sort of the bee in my bonnet here, okay, on the Biden model of AI. And that was, let's get the FTC involved. Let's get Lena Khan involved. And let's make sure that none of these guys can, you know, combine or do deals in the market, because we're concerned about monopoly. Well, it's fine to be concerned about monopoly until somebody comes along and says the way you do business is outmoded and we're going to do something different.
They wanted a monopoly that was controlled by the Biden administration. And they almost destroyed crypto by debanking founders and even their families. And the biggest issue for America is that nobody for so long has really known how far along China is with its artificial intelligence program. And so, you know, not having access to chips is one reason it wants Taiwan, China. And so this is a window into that. But I just say oh, it's so cheap for what DeepSeek did. I'm just saying it's overblown.
When they're piggybacking. But Charles, let's talk about the competition piece here, okay? Like, you don't win this race with sanctions and export controls. You win it by freeing up the most creative people in our marketplace.
Right.
To me, that's where President Trump's got to plant his flag, because Biden wasn't going to do that.
Well, we haven't even mentioned the Stargate project, which was at one point the biggest news of the week last week outside the inauguration.
That's just a week ago? My gosh.
So, yeah, there's absolutely no doubt about it. And the idea of bringing in these folks as people who are going to help us dominate the world, not looking how to break up these companies, always intimidating them, always saber rattling. It's pretty clear that we really were sleepwalking, and it is a race. It is a race. It's countries, it's companies, it's domination of the world, and it's real. It's here. We should be thankful that we have the resources here, and it's early to measure the DeepSeek thing. I did a lot of research on this. This is the only thing I worked on this weekend, and I've seen a lot of studies, a lot of them over my head. Honestly, a lot of this stuff is like, okay,
Thank you, Charles. Thanks for saying that, because I'm sitting here. You guys are smart, and I'm sitting here thinking I've got a lot to learn.
But the bottom line, though, is China wants this. And they were working on this, and the idea of an administration going to war with companies that could keep us ahead of this. I'm going to do a piece at the top of my show comparing this to the classic battle of the ironclads, of the Monitor and the Merrimack. It's going to be intriguing. So that's why
connecting AI to Civil War naval battles.
The first major battle of the ironclads. This is the updated version of that. But it's China versus America.
I want to go back to you, Jackie, because I know you're hot on the China thing here. What do you think the Trump administration needs to do to say we've got a plan to help American entrepreneurs get on top of this?
Well, I think they're doing it in a roundabout way, maybe not being as direct as you just put it, but some of the foreign policy things that President Trump is doing to show China who's boss, like, for example, if you go after Taiwan, we're not going to give you access to the Panama Canal. We're going to try to take away your power that they wielded during this Biden administration. They've aligned with Russia. He's going to work on the oil situation so that oil can't be sold to them on the black market and oil prices come down in general. I think he's doing a lot. He also implemented David Sachs to be the crypto czar and the AI czar. It's the first time we've ever had somebody in that position. Obviously, these are developing technologies.
Let me just jump in real quick and ask, should they block Americans from downloading DeepSeek right now? If we're afraid of TikTok, should we be 10 times more afraid of DeepSeek?
Now, wait a sec.
The model that came out is open source. So you can see everything that's going on.
I said to download it off the Apple app. Should they say, no, you can't download this thing?
Taylor, round this out for us.
DeepSeek is blocking. They're saying that only registration with the mainland China mobile phone number right now is supported. So they are blocking further downloads right now, probably because there's been so much demand for it that it's sort of been overwhelmed. But they're certainly making their
There's that cyber attack too that Brian just talked about.
Yep, and you know what I got to say, audience? Can you tell the Big Money Show has gotten bigger? We got a lot to talk about here, okay?